acronym for the second chapter is Gita, G-I-T-A, because second chapter is the summary of the whole Gita.
Where is that? Is that?
Oh, I did it. So, and the first letter of the acronym is G for Guru, and that's what we will be covering today from verses 1 through 10. The focus is on Guru, and we'll see how Arjuna accepts the Guru in this section. So let me share the verses.
So the way we left off last time was Arjuna finally putting down his bow and arrow. He first gives a list of arguments as to why he doesn't want to fight, and in the end he says, Govinda, I shall not fight, right? And he just lays down his bow and arrow. So we're picking it up from there. Chapter 2. Sanjaya said, seeing Arjuna full of compassion, his mind depressed, his eyes full of tears, Madhusudana, Krishna, spoke the following words.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets but to infamy.
And then text 3. O son of Pritha, do not yield to this degrading impotence. It does not become you. Give up such petty weakness of heart and arise, O chastiser of the enemy.
Arjuna said, O killer of enemies, O killer of Madhu, how can I counteract with arrows in battle men like Bhishma and Drona who are worthy of my worship? So what's going on here is, first Krishna is kind of chastising Arjuna of acting in this weakness of heart, and he says, he addresses Arjuna as son of Pritha, which is his aunt, and so he says, you are connected to me in such a glorious family, so how can you act in such an inglorious manner? And Arjuna responds in this statement by saying that I'm not weak in heart. How can I counteract somebody like Drona and Bhishma? So he's saying, would you be able to, indirectly he's saying, would you be able to shoot arrows at your own grandfather and at your own teachers? So he's kind of challenging Krishna in this way.
It would be better to live in this world by begging than to live at the cost of the lives of great souls who are my teachers. Even though desiring worldly gain, they're superiors. If they are killed, everything we enjoy will be tainted with blood.
And in this verse, nor do we know which is better, conquering them or being conquered by them. If we kill the sons of Dhritarashtra, we should not care to live. Yet they are now standing before us on the battlefield. So here Arjuna is finally kind of succumbing to this. Please move to this.
Yeah.
So this is the famous verse. So we'll recite the verse and then we'll read the translation and maybe some of the purport. So here now Arjuna decides to surrender to Krishna. He realizes that he cannot solve this dilemma on his own. So he needs superior help. Karpanya dosho pahata svabhava prichhami tvam dharma sammudha cheta yat shreyashan nishchitam bruhitan me shishyasteham shaditamam tvam prapannam.
Now I'm confused about my duty and have lost all composure because of miserly weakness. In this condition, I'm asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I am your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me.
I can
see the screen. You cannot see.
Oh, you cannot see the screen.
You cannot see the verses.
Oh, so sorry about that. Just share it. Yeah, now you can see. I can find
no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven.
Sanjaya said, having spoken thus, Arjuna, chastiser of enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight, and fell silent.
So it's very interesting. A couple of verses ago, Arjuna accepts Krishna as his guru, as teacher, and right after that, he again acts in a disobedient way. He says, he just acts in an independent way. I shall not fight. So he's kind of concluding that he's not going to fight, although he's a disciple now.
O descendant of Bharata, at that time Krishna, smiling in the midst of both the armies, spoke the following words to the grief-stricken Arjuna.
And the reason Krishna is smiling here is because just a moment ago Arjuna was acting in a friendly capacity, and now that same friend has turned into a disciple, and also he's kind of smiling at Arjuna's kind of lame arguments. So he's going to now speak the Bhagavad-Gita. So do you want to read the purport?
No,
for that?
we'll do that in the end. Yeah.
Okay. So let me share the screen again with our presentation.
Can you see?
Is the PowerPoint visible to you guys? No,
No.
not yet. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Now, right?
Now it's visible. Yeah.
Yeah, now it's came.
Okay.
So
This is the chapter 4.
Chapter 2.
Sorry, chapter 2, 4 sections. First through 10. We'll talk about Guru. So that's for G.
and it also has another way that we can understand this section, that is I need help. And then the second part of the section is verses 11 through 30. A lot of verses which talks about identity.
So in this section, Krishna is going to talk about soul. What is the soul? And what is the nature of the soul?
What is consciousness, right? And then 31 to 53, it talks about duties and how to balance our material and spiritual life, right? That's a question that we all have.
It's the conflict between Arjuna's two duties. So Krishna talks about that. And in the last section, 54 through 72, A, which stands for Atamaram, or self-realized. So this section describes the symptoms of a person who is a self-realized soul.
It's really important because, many times we don't know what transcendence should look like or does look like, right? And just like we talked about how, who do we have on our flag? And one of the questions that came up at that time was, how do we decide who to put on that flag, right? So Arjuna is asking those exact same questions on our behalf. And he's asking Krishna, so how do I know, who's someone who's actually situated in transcendence? So we'll get to that in the end of second chapter.
So today we are just going to cover verses 1 through 10, G for Guru.
So here is something that's going on, just to give you a little, sense of what's going on. Arjuna is really, really on it, right? The last section that we discussed was all about Arjuna just using a lot of logic, a lot of reasoning to try to figure out his own problem and how to come out of it. But an interesting thing that we are seeing is that the more he's justifying his position, the more depressed he seems to get, and the more he seems to feel unhappy and confused and bewildered. So this is we'll talk more about the mind as we go along in the Bhagavad Gita, but you can't really use your mind to understand your own mind. So that's an interesting concept to think about, that most of the times, even in spiritual life, we think, yeah, I'm just going to figure this out on my own, right? But how do you it's the very mind that we want to control. So
it's the very mind that we want to figure out, and the mind becomes its own obstacle, because the mind doesn't want to figure itself out, it wants to figure other things out.
Yeah.
And this is, in order to really figure out things, or knowledge actually appears in the mind and the heart when we are taking the position of humility. Humility is the womb from which knowledge appears. And so this is another great quote, that one sees great things from the valley, only small things from the peak. So one has to come down. And Arjuna is if we have two choices: either we come down by choice, or we come down out of deep frustration and anguish, or feeling this existential crisis that Arjuna felt.
It's interesting, the word humility actually comes from this word humus, and that's like a soil that's very fertile. So when the heart has humility, then it's very fertile for the seed of bhakti to actually be implanted, right? So we'll talk more as we go along. I think the next slide, no, I'm sorry, just one second. Okay,
We'll come back to that.
we'll come back to that. Okay.
No, we'll come back to this decision making.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So So this is a quote by Brené Brown where she talks about how being vulnerable is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. And we see that, I mean, if we just step back from what's really going on in this section of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is considered to be one of the greatest, and maybe not one, he is the greatest archer in the whole world. He was at that time. And everyone was looking up to him for okay, he's the one who's going to...
How soon he's going to finish off all the Kauravas.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden we see him sort of just like break down. And his breakdown doesn't happen in a quiet, like a solitary place.
Right.
It happens in front of so many people who are just about to embark on this, great war. So it's quite an embarrassing situation for him.
Because he's in front of his arch enemies, and then they are basically mocking him at that point when they see him dropping his bow and arrow, and tears coming from his eyes, and he's like in a disheveled state. So he's really sacrificing his whole reputation in front of the whole whole world, actually.
And yet that ability to kind of get to a place and say, I don't know. I can't figure this out, because we have a tendency, like if somebody says, how you doing? It's like, great.
I'm okay.
I'm okay. I got
I'm
this.
good.
Yeah, I got this, and so that's kind of how we walk around in the world. And here we see someone who's not afraid, and that requires a lot of courage. And yet that is the place from which we can see change. We can see creativity, and bhakti for sure sprouts from a very vulnerable place. It's so I guess, where do we go when we are confronted with difficult choices like this? We go back, right, to the indecision.
Yeah. So this is an interesting observation, how people make decisions, or what course of action they take in lives. There are 4 ways people make decisions, or it could be a combination of all, but typically it's in one domain. So indecision is
can I just add
Yeah.
something? So in general, and this we'll talk about this later,
Yeah.
but there are 3 modes of material nature, like 3 stages of consciousness that one could be in. So I stands for ignorance.
So in ignorance, a person is typically indecisive, and they don't really know, because there is not much knowledge there. In order to make a decision, you need some knowledge, and ignorance means there is not much knowledge, and the person is mostly indecisive. And the next one is made in like passion. So that's the mode of passion. When somebody is overcome with the mode of passion, the decision is kind of indiscretion. I'm just going to do it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Like the Nike.
Yeah.
Thing. Just do it.
Don't care about the consequences. I just ought to get this thing. So that's kind of this indiscretion.
And a person in the mode of goodness operates in a place of introspection. So he takes a moment to pause and think and reflect, and that's the platform of goodness. So these are also considered to be like 3 gunas, and when we get to this, is going to be a big topic in Bhagavad Gita. So
we'll see how Arjuna is definitely not in discretion. He's definitely not passionate, but he is mostly introspective. So he's in the mode of goodness, but he's also overcome by a little bit of ignorance, which is indecision. Finally, more because of there's too many choices for him, and he's not really able to decide.
And Duryodhana is completely indiscretion, right? He doesn't even care.
Right.
Like the best minds, his greatest well-wishers, they have been counseling him forever and ever and ever. And he couldn't care less. So that's Duryodhana. And so, but what we want is to go beyond goodness, passion, and ignorance, and to go to the spiritual platform. And that there we make a decision through inspiration.
And that's what Arjuna realizes, that the introspection and indecision is not really helping him. He needs something else to get him out of the situation. Break open, basically.
So this is again, a book. There is a book called Broken Open, and it talks about how it's during our moments of greatest difficulties, when we find ourselves confronted with great challenges. If we allow that challenge to open us, to deeper spiritual knowledge, then it can actually transform us. It can lead to a very deep place of transformation at all levels. And so that's what's happening with Arjuna, that he is in a crisis, no question about that. And his crisis is for everyone to see. But then he's allowing that crisis. He's the way he's approaching that crisis is by allowing himself to be seen, acknowledging it, being vulnerable, and then approaching a person who can actually give him that inspiration and then guidance, right? So we just wanted to share this little video, which is so beautiful, about the journey of we see beautiful butterflies, and we get so like they're breathtakingly beautiful, but they have a journey, and that journey is not always very easy. So let's watch this little video. Is that? Do you remember? Okay. That's sort of like the egg, right? Huh.
It's a biology lesson for all of you.
I mean, when I saw this, it was, very stunning. So it kind of goes to show that our journey through our countless experiences in this world are no doubt not so easy, and as you can even see, like Arjuna is really struggling in the same way we struggle with so many decisions and so many crises, and yet if we allow ourselves to take that place, then we can grow. But another quality that is really, really important for our growth is to see our insignificance, and that we see when Arjuna finally comes to Krishna and he says, I don't really know what's right for me, and he uses the word miserly weakness, and he says that I have weakness of heart. I don't really know whether I should be, what I should be doing. And this is a thread that you see in many other places as well. We have two great bhakti teachers, Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami. And when they approached Lord Chaitanya, they had, even though they were so learned and they were such great scholars, right? They approached him in that same mood.
Yeah, so this insignificance, understanding one's insignificance is really, please mute yourself.
Let's see.
Yeah, this insignificance is good to meditate on, and maybe every day we think about this, as what is my place in this universe, and where do I come from, and that allows us to really connect to our source, and also realize what a wonderful source we come from.
Yeah, it allows us to also receive, become a receiver, because as long as, it's interesting, the word okay, and we've talked about this, right? That how the word okay really means that no one killed, zero killed, right? And you were telling us the story, I don't know if you want to mention that. But anyways, we have this mindset of like pride that I have it under my control, and if I don't, using all my resources, I can make this work.
And also, if I am not there, then what will happen to this world? So that's another aspect of our kind of silent pride in our mind, that I am really important, and if I am not there, then what will happen? So hopefully this video will allow us to see that how insignificant we are, and that there lies our greatness in one sense.
This is Earth. This is where you live. And this is where you live in your neighborhood. The solar system. Here's the distance between the Earth and the Moon. Doesn't look too far, does it? Think again. At their farthest points, the Earth and the Moon are 252,088 miles away. Inside that distance, you can fit every planet in our entire solar system. But let's talk about planets. The Great Red Spot on Jupiter, that's about 2 times as big as Earth. And Saturn is about 9 times wider than Earth. Saturn's rings are so large that a few of the fragments within them are as large as mountains. But that's nothing compared to our sun. Just remember, this is Earth. And this is Earth from the Moon. This is Earth from Mars. Here's Earth from just behind Saturn's rings. And here's Earth from just beyond Neptune, 4 billion miles away. But a billion's a big number, so let's put that in perspective. 1 million seconds equals about 11 and a half days, whereas 1 billion seconds equals over 31 years. Let's step back a bit. Here's the size of Earth compared with the size of our sun. Terrifying, right? And here's that exact same sun from the surface of Mars. As Carl Sagan once mused, the total number of stars in the universe is larger than all the grains of sand on all the beaches of planet Earth. And there are some stars out there that are much, much bigger than our little wimpy sun. The biggest star we know of, EY Canis Majoris, is about 2,000 times the diameter of our sun. But none of those compares to the size of a galaxy. In fact, if you shrink the size of our solar system down to the size of a quarter and shrink the Milky Way galaxy down using the same scale, the diameter of the Milky Way will be roughly the size of the United States.
Can you see it?
That's because the Milky Way galaxy is
There's more in there.
its diameter is about 100,000 light years wide, which, when converted to
So I was just thinking as we were watching this that how Prabhupada also had a similar exchange with one of his students who had a, who was quite a confident person. So Prabhupada noticed that about him, and he said, so, you live in, and this was a street in Los Angeles. He said, you live in Los Angeles on this street, and this, he said, you live on this street, and this street is in Los Angeles city, and Los Angeles city is a city in North America, and this North America is one continent on this planet Earth, and then this Earth is one planet in the solar system, and then he went on like that, and he kept taking. He said, and then this one person, tiny person who lives here, he's thinking, I am so great. So he just wanted to bring home this point to his student that even though we may have a very inflated sense of self, but compared to our place in the universe, like there's another video that we saw where it's just that our Earth is just this tiny dot, and then we are within that tiny dot, right? So that helps us approach this knowledge. Any knowledge, in fact, requires a mood of humility.
And it also allows us to see that sometimes we get overwhelmed. We get overwhelmed with our problems, and then our problems seem so big. And every morning we can come out and look at the sky and the sun and the moon, and we can feel, after all, my problems are not that big, because I am also not big. I'm insignificant, so my problems are also insignificant compared to this universe. And so that way it opens the door for approaching an expert. But I guess because our mind says I'm big, I don't need an expert.
Yeah, we do have some reservations about finding someone that can help us. And this is actually this whole journey of Arjuna, that he's finally surrendering to Krishna, and he's saying that I'm a soul surrendered unto you, and please accept me as a disciple. And so we may feel like, oh, I don't really need a guru, or I don't really need someone to tell me. I can figure this out on my own.
And this is a very emerging trend now, that sometimes we feel that I don't need an expert in any area, especially when it comes to spirituality. The tendency is that I can figure it out on my own. I mean, I don't want anybody to tell me what to think.
So I guess we'll just show one video, right?
You can show both. I mean,
I don't
1
know.
minute each.
Let's try. Do you remember where it was?
The latest
So this is a person. Let's just give a little background.
Yeah.
So here's Tom Nichols. He's written a book called The Death of Expertise, and in this video he talks about how we are increasingly becoming uncomfortable, right, with experts. So let's.
And
watch.
he's I think in a pretty big post in the government, some national security advisor or
The
something.
book, The Death of Expertise, shares his humble opinion on the demise of experts.
A few years ago, a mischievous group of pollsters asked American voters whether they would support bombing the country of Agrabah. As you might expect, Republicans tended to support military action, while Democrats were more reluctant. There's only one problem. Agrabah doesn't exist. It's from the animated Disney film Aladdin. Only about half the people surveyed figured this out, and liberals and conservatives gleefully pointed fingers at each other. For experts in foreign affairs, however, there was no way around the alarming reality that so many Americans had a well-defined view on bombing a cartoon. I'm one of those experts. I teach both civilians and military officers about national security affairs. In my career, I've advised the Pentagon, the CIA, and political leaders from both major parties. Increasingly, however, lay people don't care about expert views. Instead, many Americans have become insufferable know-it-alls, locked in constant conflict with each other while knowing almost nothing about the subject they're debating. How did this happen?
Okay, so we'll
How
pause
is
here.
it that people
So-
now not only
We just wanted to, bring to focus the idea that, in any field, in order to really understand that field properly, we want to approach a person that knows. And sometimes the word guru might have certain connotations, but in reality, it's just a person who has studied and who has been practicing, and so he has the expertise to guide us and show us how we can actually practice this. Because Prabhupada, he would use the word science, and spirituality is really a science, even though it deals with emotions, it deals with the mind. So sometimes the tendency is to think that anything to do with that doesn't really require any kind of discipline or education or training, but it actually does. And so when we approach a person who actually is familiar with that, then we find ourselves making very rapid progress.
Yeah, generally when it's something to do with our body or mind, then we are okay to go to an expert. But when it comes to our real self, then we are very uncomfortable. So Arjuna is showing by his example that as long as we are uncomfortable dealing with our real self, so the issues will actually will always confound
I was
us.
just thinking, I had a very interesting, just thought right now that, for the longest time, people have had discomfort. So people have been comfortable with, if they have a bodily problem, they're happy to go see a doctor.
But not a psychologist.
But if they have something to do with the mind, then there is some sort of like discomfort around it. Increasingly, that's changing. And then there's a third level. Then what about when we have, when our consciousness is somehow not connected? Then again, we cringe from it. But here, Arjuna, again, by his example, is showing that it's okay, that it's all right to get guidance and to get training in spiritual science, so that we can actually become well situated. So we'll continue on. How do I go ahead?
doubt expert?
Another famous quote: "One who accepts himself as a guru accepts a fool for a disciple."
I think it's by Einstein, I think. Oh, no, it couldn't be. It couldn't be. So here is something that, the ancient Vedic scriptures, they talk about, the great good fortune of finding a teacher. It's considered to be one of the rarest thing. It is described that after wandering in countless universes for countless lifetimes, one actually finally gets a good fortune of finding a right teacher. They also say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
And the odds are described by this this is amazing experiment that there's a turtle which only comes, it normally stays at the bottom of the ocean and only comes up once in 100 years. And say there is a ring, a wooden ring, or you can imagine any kind of ring floating in the ocean somewhere. So what are the chances of this turtle putting his head inside this ring and wearing this ring as a necklace, you can say? So it sounds quite impossible, right, or quite improbable. So that is, first of all, so that's the first improbability, is getting a human life, which is very improbable. And the second is finding a true guru who can really help us out of this whole messy material situation.
This is a nice poem. Many things threaten life, which is even more ephemeral than a bubble of water full of air. How amazing is the opportunity to exhale after inhaling and to awake from sleep. So just to kind of reiterate this idea that, this idea of the rarity of first getting a human body and then being able to use that human body to get out of this body, right? And that for that we do need a guru, and Arjuna is saying that, to Krishna. Oh, so before we talk about this, I think, one of the things that you guys might have noticed when we were reading the verses is this idea of being a miser.
So in the seventh verse, when Arjuna finally surrenders to Krishna as his student, the first word that he uses, he says, Karpanya dosha bhata sabhava, which means my consciousness overcome by this miserly weakness of heart. So this miserly word is described by Prabhupada as that a miser is a person who...
I don't think we should give it away.
Okay.
Let's first watch it and then we'll discuss this more, this idea of being a miser.
The miser and his gold. Once upon a time, there was a miser who used to hide his gold at the foot of a tree in his garden. But every week, he used to go and dig it up and gloat over his gains. A robber who had noticed this went and dug up the gold and decamped with it. When the miser next came to gloat over his treasures, he found nothing but the empty hole.
You can show on the screen,
Tore
right?
his hair and raised such an outcry that all
We
the
don't have
neighbors
much time.
came around him. And he told them
fast.
how he used to come and
You can
visit
just
his
read.
gold.
Take 7.
Did you ever take any of it out?
इसके बाद देखो कितना टेक्स्ट कितने स्लाइड्स हैं.
Nay.
Shreyas versus Preyas. Shreyas versus Preyas.
We can't finish some
Get
of
it for the hole, said the neighbor. It'll do you just
We can do that
as much
tomorrow.
good. Wealth unused might as well not exist.
So this is exactly the point that Prabhupada actually makes. So we're running out of time here a little bit. So I think we have a few more slides. So what we'll probably do is continue this tomorrow, is it?
Yeah.
So we'll just read Prabhupada's purport here, where he talks about this idea of being a miser. So he talks about how there are miserly. So why would a person who does not use, why would this word miser be used in this context? And the reason is, just like you said, just like you saw here, that this person has so much wealth, but then all he does with that wealth is just goes and he sees it, gloats over it every day, right? So he might as well not have it. So in the same way, the ancient Vedic texts, they describe this human body as being a great gift, a great wealth. But if we just don't use this wealth,
And the intelligence that the human body gets is very suitable for examining the real problems of life and getting out of this cycle of birth and death. But if that intelligence, which is like the gold, the wealth of gold, is not used for getting out of here rather than just staying here and then being happy in this place, then it's like the miser whose wealth is ultimately stolen away. So a death in the form of that robber comes and steals away this great wealth we have, and then we have nothing left. Because after the human life, if you don't use it properly, Bhagavad-Gita is going to describe later on that it depends where we go. We don't have a certainty where we will go.
I think we'll just end this because there's one last poem. I think we'll just read that, and
Yeah.
that way we can finish this section, and then we'll take questions. So
I don't have the poem here. I have to bring out the printout.
a minute while we wait. So in the meantime, I'll just. Sorry about that. So, the other point is that the other concept that Arjuna introduces in this section, that is introduced in the Bhagavad Gita in this section, is called Shreyas versus Preyas. So where Arjuna is saying that tell me for sure what is good for me in the long run. So the Sanskrit word that is often used to depict that, Shreyas versus Preyas. So, most of the times we are concerned with our short-term gain, right? What's going to happen to me tomorrow? How do I get my career together, my happiness together? But the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is not asking Krishna to just help him with his short-term problem. He's asking him to help him with his long-term problem, which is the existential problem. And this is an interesting graph, which is called the hedonistic graph, where it shows that most people, when good stuff happens, they reach a peak. And when bad stuff happens, then they feel like they're sort of down in the dumps. But the study shows that over a period of time, people always have a set point where they come to. So in that sense, it doesn't matter. Like they say that if a person wins a lottery, or if someone gets their leg amputated, one would say, oh, this person has really had it good and the other person has really had it bad. And they looked at the statistics and they found that in 6 months, both of them had exactly the same level of happiness that was reported. And they put it together. So the point is, Arjuna is not interested in that kind of happiness.
And then I think that's another thing, that when somebody typically finds a guru or something, then what to inquire from the guru is Arjuna is showing that he says, yes, Shreyashan Nishitam Bruhitan me, that tell me what is really good for me. And this inquiry about what is really me and what is really good for me is very important, because otherwise one can just inquire, okay, how can I get really comfortable in this life? And that is not the question to ask a guru.
So we'll
So
end.
please mute yourself.
We'll end here now with this beautiful poem called The Old Violin. So why this is another reason why a teacher can actually help us, right? Get out of our limited sphere of abilities. So I'll just read the poem and then we'll end here. It was battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it hardly worth his while to waste his time on the old violin, but he held it with a smile. What am I bid, good people? He cried. Who starts the bidding for me? $1, $1, do I hear two? $2, who makes it three? $3 once, $3 twice, going for three. But no, from the room for back a grey bearded man, with a voice that was quiet and low, said, what now am I bid for this old violin, as he held it aloft with its bow? 1,000, 1,000, do I hear two? 2,000, who makes it three? 3,000 once, 3,000 twice, going and gone, said he. The audience cheered, but some of them cried. We just don't understand. What changed its worth? Swift came the reply, the touch of the master's hand. And many a man with life out of tune, all battered and bruised with hardship, is auctioned cheap to a thoughtless crowd, much like that old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and he travels on. He's going once, he's going twice, he's going and almost gone. But the master comes, and the foolish crowd never can quite understand the worth of a soul and the change that is wrought by the touch of the master's hand. So just to make this point about how we've seen that, there were so many followers, disciples of Prabhupada when they met him, and next time we'll tell you more stories of how, some of them.
And there was, when somebody would look at them, because Prabhupada's teacher, Bhaktisiddhanta, he sent actually some of his disciples to different places, but they said it's really hard to transform these people because they are not really interested in this spirituality. So when Prabhupada came, he picked up these hippies who had no, like they were not like the poster boys for picking up the spirituality, and with all the bad habits and everything, and with his masterful hand, he actually transformed them into great saintly people who transformed so many other people around the world.
And we'll see that with Arjuna also.
Yeah.
That because he is now connecting with Krishna, we'll see his transformation as he goes along. So we'll pause here and wait for your reflections and your questions and your comments.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm thinking about the difference between a spiritual teacher
Yes.
and any other kind of teacher or expert, like in the material sense. And, because like if you have okay, sorry, I'm thinking how to articulate my question. Does association with a spiritual person or a spiritual master, is that able to change you or to teach you something just by virtue of your association with them?
Yeah, it is both. Association really means hearing from the spiritual master and then following on those instructions. That is the real meaning of association. But even if just in the presence of a spiritual teacher and the openness of our heart to accept their instructions, or receive those instructions, that is what transforms the student.
Yeah, and like you said, it's both,
Yeah.
because for us as well, you ask a question, you hear the answer, and then you see how they're actually walking their talk. And so that impacts, because, when we've been reading all these texts, and when you see a person who's living those texts, that's when it comes alive. And then you say, oh, it's possible.
And it's like a flash of light in the heart, because that presence of such a person is spiritually so powerful that at least it plants a seed in the heart that, yeah, such kind of people exist, and the heart or the soul rather gets attracted to such a person. It may not be able to follow it or accept it at that point for many people, but that change, that impact is there. It's a very powerful impact.
Alokaji,
Yes.
the way
Can you
my-
type?
Can
We can ask people. We request all of you to type your questions because we have limited time, and just to save everybody's time.
And that way we can hear from
Everybody.
many more people.
Yeah.
So Deidre is saying St. Francis of Assisi, he was transformed from ordinariness. What we do with the teachings. Is that a question, or you making a comment here? What about the idea that every person has an eternal relationship with the true guru? Is this? Yes, it is. This is the idea in Vaishnavism. It's a comment. Okay. Yeah. Love the story of St. Francis of Assisi.
Yeah, he's one of our
Yeah.
all-time heroes.
Yeah, and you can see that, one has to, it's not just, okay, I follow someone. Following someone means being able to, take on,
the mission.
the mission and the purpose. So please go ahead and type your reflections and your questions, so that at every path of our life, you're making us understand Gita. Thank you. Thank you, Om Prakashi. Thank you for that. I guess if you don't have questions, we're requesting, this is part of our I guess one of the ways that we like to integrate everything is that we, if we can have some reflections. So something that you saw today or heard today that really resonated, or that you found interesting, that you would like to share back with the group. And that actually helps the rest of the group as well, Stefano, thank you. Does everyone need to be on flat line instead of focusing on ups and downs?
Yeah, that's the line of our spiritual self. If we are focusing on that spiritual spark within us, then we won't be affected by these ups and downs. And Krishna is going to talk a little bit more about that in the second segment, how to be equipoised.
That's a good point, Vishal, how we have different gurus. And there is a section in 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam where it talks about how we can see guru in nature, right? So this person, he walks around and he learns something from the water, then he learns something from the arrow maker. He even learns something from a prostitute, So if we are connected in this way, then we can learn. And
ultimately, the guru is one, and he appears, ultimately guru is the supreme person. And for our benefit, he appears in different forms. So he appears as in that form of our parents and teachers and all different aspects of our life.
nice. Deidre, thank you for that reflection. Really, really appreciate a reflection, that level of decision. That's true. And Shringari is saying that's so true. If you don't make use of the human body, it's like having its treasure unused and wasted. And Delia saying, a worldly expert will show us. Can we go up? It's going on fast now.
Avalanche.
a worldly expert will show us how to do something, an expert in cooking, engineering. I think a spiritual guru will show us how to be our true selves. Absolutely.
Yes.
That is very nice. Kirti, thank you. A lot of good things from today's class. Hare Krishna. I love the fact of submission. Until you submit, you don't submerge in spirituality.
Very nice.
Very nice. I like the phrase, you can't understand your own mind by using your own mind. Our mind seems to justify what's in our best interest. When we are ready as a student, teacher appears. Very true. So these reflections are really powerful because it's like you eat and you digest, right? And Om Prakash Prabhu would know that as someone who also practices Ayurveda, that it's not just enough to eat, but it's very important for us to digest. And so this reflection process is how we sort of take a moment. Christ's parable of the talents has some similarity to the story of the miser. Yeah, it's interesting, when we were, I was doing some search, and even this, this story about this turtle coming up is something that we say it all the time from our ancient texts. But I saw that it's a very common story even in the Buddhist tradition. So it's so nice to see the universality, Once we are oh Daryl, so nice to have you. Once we are awakened to our true self, is the next step to seek out a teacher, or is your teacher rather drawn to you?
Yeah, we seek out a teacher, just like we seek out a teacher for any other need in our life. So we seek out a teacher. The first step is to understand what a teacher is and what a disciple is, and that's what we'll learn from Bhagavad-Gita. And why do I need a teacher? Because sometimes in today's day and age, it's kind of become fashionable to have a guru or spiritual guru, because it kind of maybe uplifts my image, or in so many different ways, or I can use the guru for some problem solving in my life. So one has to understand what is the true need for a guru. Why do I need a guru, and what it means to be a disciple? And then one can seek out a guru. One should seek out a guru.
Actually, there was another point that I wanted to add from this section, which is Arjuna is also showing what it means to be a student.
Yeah.
Right, that he's like ready to receive. So to be in that receiver's mode where I say yes,
It's just like going to a doctor. If you don't have a problem, then you're not going to go to the doctor. And if you go to the doctor and if the doctor says take this medicine, and we say no, I'm going to take some other medicine because I think, then there's no point going to the doctor.
Vishal, really like your comment where you showed 4 different ways of making decisions and how spirituality helps in making decisions, which is beneficial for all. So thank you all for your wonderful comments and reflections. Like I said, because we talk so much, so for us it's very nice to hear from you, and hear from you. It completes the circle.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you all. So we'll end it here.
I would just like to see everyone who's there. Ray, Eric, nice. Delia.
Ray, are you in a park or something?
So beautiful.
I'm in my backyard.
Oh,
it's like
beautiful.
a park. Sapna, Tarun.
It's beautiful out today.
Juma. Hare Krishna, everyone. All right, so I guess, yeah. All right, so we'll stop here and we'll continue. So tomorrow is going to be a very big section.
We'll probably take 2 sessions. We're going to talk about the soul and identity. So a lot of good stuff in there, and we are hoping to finish the 2nd chapter this week. So if you get a chance, read the verses, at least the translations ahead of time. That will give you some context.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Delia.